to the Brainiac Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rockstar.
This episode, I sit down for a chat with Daniel Peter, Salesforce MVP, Bay Area Salesforce Developer User Group Organizer, and Lead Applications Engineer at Kennedy. Daniel shares his wild experiences at 3 Salesforce community events, Tahoe Dreamin', Snowforce, and Punta Dreamin'. I think Daniel traveled more in the last few weeks than I did in the last 15 years. Daniel gives us some insight and advice on how he uses Salesforce to solve common business problems using both native and custom solutions in ways that are both effective and efficient.
How many people here know what Einstein intent is? You guys familiar with it? I'll just explain a little bit then. It's kind of a general purpose natural language processing classifier. They market it for like sales and service use cases, like routing, billing inquiries, to the right department, case lead routing, things like that. But you can actually use it for almost anything you can come up with. So if you think about it in Salesforce, a lot of times you have like a status or a stage, and maybe you have a whole bunch of text that you want to use to kind of predict that status or stage. That's kind of a good use case for this. I'm here with getting ready to enjoy.
Customers are happy, your company's thriving, and when your company's thriving, you're truly at your best. You're at the top of your game.
This is what I was meant to do my whole life.
Thank you, Daniel. I hope we refresh some good moments of your life. And this is how we introduce our guest here. I hope that doesn't get embarrassed. Would you like to say a few words? Do you need a mic?
Yes. Also, how about the mic?
Yes. We are using hotspot.
Wow, that was an amazing video. Thank you. You reminded me of some things I forgot about. Okay, well, how many people were just here for the meetup with Erica? India is amazing. You're coming out twice, like within a week. So we're just talking about the Indian Salesforce community and how maybe they're a little bit more crazy than other parts in the U.S. In the U.S., you probably wouldn't be able to come out for a second time. So thank you for being here. So I've been learning a lot while I'm here. It's an amazing time for the Salesforce developer community in India. I think it's always been very big, but it hasn't. The world hasn't been very aware of it. So I'm excited to see, Hyderabad trailblazing, some of these other things that are going on that are bringing awareness. So maybe in a couple of years, India will just be another Salesforce developer community with the same awareness, say, as the U.S. So I'm excited to see this happening. Going good. So I have a couple topics tonight. One of them is kind of a fun surprise. The other one is something I've been speaking about at several of these meetups, some large data volume tricks. So how many folks here work Hyderabad trailblazing? Okay. And I don't think, was anybody at the Jaipur meetup? No, okay.
They knew that you were coming here.
Yeah, that helps me to know how to tailor the content. So I'm glad I have some new stuff. So even if you were at Hyderabad trailblazing, I will show some stuff from the Jaipur meetup tonight on large data volumes, if we can get on Wi-Fi. If not, we'll have to do some large data queries through cell phone. We'll see how that works. Okay. Hold up. All right. So while this is going, we should probably keep it rolling. Does anybody have like a quick question for me or anything? Are you curious about my stay in India or?
Just have a question. Have you been on my? Yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
I just have a question. I even sent a message on Twitter to you asking you about. With due respect, right? I'm just confused with this. When we see that on social media, certification terms are being openly said. So
Yeah.
is that something Salesforce aware of?
Is that something they?
Is Salesforce aware of this, that the terms are being said?
Yeah, they are aware of it. Actually, I've been asked this question before, and I didn't mention this before, but I've actually been on the Salesforce board that help, the team that helps to grade these things, and I've caught some cheating through there. So definitely aware, and I've actually helped Salesforce to find these things before. So I wouldn't recommend using those. The main reason is you actually need to learn the material. The certification is somewhat valuable, but really what's very valuable is the knowledge that went into earning it. The dumps don't get you the knowledge. So.
I just have another question which I asked you. That is about 75% code coverage which we use. So I'm a bit confused about it. On what basis Salesforce decide this code coverage? Because when it is like we can even complete the code within 3 to 4 lines, and that can even match up to 75%, even though if the code is completely not correct. I know that is not the correct method to follow for writing the code, but at high times there are people who follow this.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is Salesforce, on what basis they have decided for this
75%
of code coverage?
Yeah.
On testing paper, when we develop, there is a code coverage we need to have.
Sure. I think it's just a compromise, right? It's very hard to reach 100% because of some limitations, some things you can't even get code coverage for. But the idea is to prevent regression bugs when you deploy things like this. So I think they've compromised at 75, so they're not making it impossible to deploy things, but they're giving enough coverage to where they'll catch most of these, even if you have bad assertions, at least they'll catch sort of runtime errors, things like that.
So, but when we see, like, we can even write the code within 4 to 5 lines without even following the proper procedure of writing it. So what happens is, at high times, there are developers who practice this.
Yeah.
So even if the code is not completely correct,
Uh-huh.
that might be the issue later on. Not at that moment, but later on it can be the issue. So what has Salesforce thought about this?
So you're saying they should improve the requirement and not make it 75, but make it something more meaningful?
No, I'm not saying that it should not be 75, but it is more on the basis of lines, like you write.
Yeah.
So like if I'm writing a code on the basis of lines, if I've written it in 4 lines, there could be a logic on the second line as well as the statement on the same line, same line. What I'm saying is, if I'm not writing it on following the proper structure or the procedure, if I'm writing the 50% of code on within 2 lines and another 50% in another 2 lines, so it creates sometimes, even if the other 2 lines, if they are not correct, sometimes it even it clarifies as the 25% it runs. So that might be for time, but later on for the organization it could be an issue.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is like lines, that
Yeah.
small change makes a big change in the percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think there's too many people that pay for Salesforce that only have 4 lines of code. So it's probably an edge case.
No, actually that is not the issue, but when we see in startups, these practices are being followed, and I have heard this from people. So I am confused whether this is a flaw or is this something which Salesforce knows.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that people have filed cases on this before and they know about it. So the testing and the code coverage is definitely not perfect. It's just it's nice that they make you do something, because without that, people may not do any testing even with the problems. It's better than no testing. But yeah, we'll have more time for questions, but those are good ones. Thank you. Okay, coding tricks for large data volume access. So, we're in Pune, so I was told I'm supposed to say namaskar instead of namaste. So, namaskar for having me tonight. Okay. Cool thing is, I don't need to introduce myself because that video is very good. So, you know who I am now. So, how many people were here for this December 9th, 2017 event? One person, 2? Yes. Oh, a few more. Cool. Well, I was actually here too, but virtually. So, it's kind of crazy that I'm here now in person. So that's just a testament to how awesome the Salesforce community is. To be here in the same room that I was virtually, and back then I had no idea I would be here in person. So very cool. Being involved in the Salesforce community will take you into lots of cool situations like this. So
It
that's
shows
one.
dreams do come true.
Yes, yes. So we maybe planted the seed way back in December for me to be here tonight.
We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Okay, so on to the content. Large data set. Basically what I have here, if our demo works, I have 400,000 records, which I got from the Bitcoin website. I got from a website, and it's got historical Bitcoin prices for several years. It's got some data about it. We can take a look at what data is in there, take a look at a record in Salesforce. It's really not that large, but I was only able to get 1 gigabyte of storage in this dev org, so that's 500,000 records. I just put 400,000 in there so we could play with it. But that kind of is enough data to start seeing some of these large data issues. Some terminology tonight. You might hear me talking about chunking. I don't know, do people know what this word means? Basically, it just means like breaking the data up into groups of rows. Using this kind of technique is really good for the Salesforce multi-tenant platform because you can access lots of little things in parallel at the same time. That's what Salesforce is made to do. It's made to serve like many customers at the same time. So by chunking up and running in parallel, you're leveraging that architecture instead of fighting it. Also, you might hear PK chunking. This is like a specific form of chunking, and PK is just primary key. This is the term Salesforce came up with, but it's just that Salesforce ID. It's chunking on that Salesforce ID. And the name actually came from the bulk API. It supports PK chunking natively. If anyone's used that when you're working on very large data volumes with the bulk API, if you add this header into the request, you'll get PK chunking for free. It'll just do it for you, and it'll return more batches of results, like one for each chunk. But even though they've named it and given this to the bulk API, you can implement this yourself. And the way you implement it is adding some additional where clause to all your queries. You say where ID is greater than and where ID is less than some ID. And we'll see more about how you do that. But basically, I just wanted to right now introduce what PK chunking is, what chunking is, so you understand this terminology. So why do we use the primary key? This is pretty hard to see, but what we have here is a query plan tool, and you can see we're running a query, and this where clause right here is filtering the query where name equals the name. And this has a certain cost right here associated with it. Similar query here, we're actually filtering on ID, and this one has another cost associated here. So this cost in the query plan tool, if you've used this, lower is better, and you can see the numbers. So when we filter on name, we have this cost. When we filter on ID, we have this cost. So name cost for running a query is 3 times greater than ID. So it's interesting because both of these fields are system fields. They're both indexed, but ID is by far the cheapest, the lowest cost one to use for running your query. So the takeaway there is that primary key is the most well-indexed field in the whole database. Works much better than name, works better than created date. So that's why we leverage primary key for our chunking. But the other thing it has, is always present. You can't create a record in Salesforce without that ID. And then this one is very cool. So the Salesforce ID is a composite ID. It looks like text. It's got three digits that are the object ID, 2 digits that are the pod that it came from. And then it's got this reserved digits, and then the last 9 digits are this really big base 62 number, uppercase, lowercase, alphabet plus the numbers give you 62 digits. And with those 62 digits, you get like 14 quadrillion numbers. If you had base 10, you would only get like a billion. So it's a very big number, and it's composite, but that base 62 number on the end, Salesforce database knows how to order that thing. So when you say, sort by ID, or you say ID greater than, ID less than, kind of think of it more like an auto-incrementing number, like, maybe people are used to thinking about base 10. So it's very consistent and very reliable to sort and chunk on primary key. Some other things aren't so much, like if you try to use created date, you might have 1,000 records created on one date and on the other, so it's hard to chunk on that. But primary key, you have 1 per record. It's kind of like a number, like much more predictable. So also in our demos, I'm going to be using a Lightning app. So this app's on Salesforce, but not really the coolest way to access large data. So if you try to run an Apex query, you're going to get a governor limit at 50,000 records. At least with Visualforce, you could do read-only and get 100,000 records, but they don't have that with Lightning, so we're going to take a look at a demo where we can do some big data with Lightning. And so we talked about a large data set and some chunking. But what does large data volume really mean? I think it's kind of an ambiguous term. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but for tonight, I just want to think about it as like a volume of data that's going to cause some errors with typical programming patterns. And these can kind of fall into two categories. So one is you're trying to return too many records. And actually, to hit this problem, you don't even need a ton of data, you just need more than 50,000. So like 50,001 records will hit this first problem. So we'll call that large data. And then the other case is you have a ton of data, maybe millions of records. Maybe you only want to return one record. So you're like querying large data, but you're returning a reasonable amount, some smaller amount of data. And these are the ones where you'll hit non-selective query, where it won't even execute the query, or maybe the query will run, but it'll time out. These types of errors. So the use case where you're returning large amounts of records, this may or may not be a good use case. So I wanted to put some considerations here. You know, do users really want to see hundreds of thousands of records on the screen? If they do, you're probably going to need client-side pagination to keep the DOM from blowing up there. Just even holding the records in JavaScript memory, not in the DOM, but just in memory, you'll start to notice your browser getting slower, you know, as you approach 1 million records. But you can store a lot of these records in JavaScript in memory and then slice and dice, like pagination, filtering, and swap pieces of the data in and out of the DOM. Also, you may see Chrome crashes with this off-snap error. So if you have requirements and the customer needs to have a ton of data in their browser, you're going to hit the 1 gigabyte heap with the V8 engine of Chrome. You can recommend the customer uses Firefox with a 4 gigabyte SpiderMonkey JavaScript engine. It'll keep going. It'll be a little slower, but it'll let you grow to much more data than Chrome. So some considerations, but in some cases this really is a valid use case. It's limited, but sometimes you really do need to return more than 50,000 rows. So when you do end up deciding to do this, here's how to do it. So as we said, Lightning only do 50,000 records, but Visualforce can do 100,000 in read-only mode. So we'll look at an example of how you can access a Visualforce page. It's kind of your data query workhorse through a Lightning app. You know, we talked about chunking for horizontal partitioning, but there's also some vertical partitioning you can do. So sometimes your large data is, you know, big in both directions. In that case, you might hit the 20,000 character Stockwell query limit. So in this case, you might have to run multiple queries and include the ID in both query. You know, one half of the fields in one query and one half in another. And you do this vertical partitioning and join them back together in JavaScript. And using this chunking and this vertical partitioning, basically you can scale as big as you want, both for the number of fields and the number of records. So this is a key takeaway of this whole talk is the API won't time out, you know, in most cases.